We find ourselves in a planetary emergency. Human activities are putting unprecedented pressure on Earth's ecosystems, and unless we take drastic action, the human race will no longer have a sustainable home. CO2 levels are higher than at any time in at least 800,000 years, and global temperatures are already more than 1 degree centigrade higher than they were before the Industrial Revolution. And scientists are warning that so-called tipping point risks are far greater than anticipated. So, what do we need to do to survive? Today, I'd like to talk to you about planetary boundaries. In 2009, a group of scientists led by Johan Rockström at the Stockholm Resilience Centre joined forces to develop a framework setting out preconditions for human development. They eventually identified the 9 boundaries within which humanity could prosper without destroying the planet. These cover everything from ocean acidification to climate change, and are the ecological ceiling or boundaries that we cannot cross without untold and unpredictable consequences happening. So let's take a brief look at these 9 boundaries identified in the framework. They're in no particular order of priority, so we will work our way around the model, starting with the stratospheric ozone depletion. The stratospheric ozone layer is critical in filtering out ultraviolet radiation from the sun. Number 2 on the framework is the loss of biosphere integrity. This is biodiversity loss and extinctions. Human activity is putting a huge strain on biodiversity, leading to extinction and damaged ecosystems. Number 3 is chemical pollution and the release of novel entities. Emissions of toxins and long-lived substances known as forever chemicals can have irreversible effects on living organisms and the physical environment. Number 4 on the model is climate change. Human activity is already transgressing climate boundaries as rising temperatures destroy ice caps and they weaken carbon sinks and raise sea levels. Boundary number 5 is ocean acidification. Much of the CO2 we emit is dissolved in the oceans, increasing the acidity and threatening marine species and organisms. Now let's take a look at number 6. This is freshwater consumption and the global hydrological cycle. River flow and land use changes are making water a scarcity for millions of people. Number 7 is land system change, converting forests and wetlands etc. for agricultural use, which reduces biodiversity and affects water flows and biogeochemical cycling of elements like CO2. Number 8 is nitrogen and phosphorus flows to the biosphere and the oceans. Use of fertilisers contaminates the water cycle, polluting waterways and aquatic systems. And finally, planetary boundary number 9 is atmospheric aerosol loading. Aerosols interact with water vapour, which affects the climate and pollutes the air. What this framework offers is a science-based approach to understanding the impact that humans are having on Earth systems. The idea is that by understanding these boundaries, we can find safe spaces for human development within them. This concept of finding a safe operating space is now a really important part of the debate around sustainable development. And the framework offers a new way of thinking about our relationship with our planet, and it gives us hope that if we stay within these limitations, we might just avoid irreversible environmental change. However, we're already reaching tipping points. These are the red lines which, when crossed, result in chaotic, unpredictable, but ultimately devastating consequences. Sea levels will surge, carbon emissions will accelerate, and our Earth will no longer offer a safe home for humankind. The Planetary Boundaries framework is all about understanding where those danger zones or tipping points lie, and finding a safe space in which humans can thrive. It's a shocking fact that we've already transgressed 4 of the 9 boundaries. These are biodiversity loss, climate change, overuse of nutrients and land change use. Now let's look at a couple of these in more detail. Firstly, we'll consider the one people are perhaps more familiar with, and this is climate change. Evidence suggests that with CO2 levels as they are currently, we've already transgressed this planetary boundary, and we're approaching several Earth systems thresholds. The loss of summer polar sea ice is almost certainly irreversible, and the weakening of carbon sinks through destruction of rainforests is yet another potential tipping point. The real question is how long we can remain over this boundary before large irreversible changes just become unavoidable. Let's consider another important planetary boundary, the loss of biosphere integrity. This relates to how human activity leads to biodiversity loss and species extinctions. Our actions have caused more damage to ecosystems over the last 50 years than at any time in human history. This has largely been driven by growing demand for food, water and commodities. We clear land for agriculture and industry, we pillage the natural world for resources, and we pollute our oceans with microplastics. We pollute land and freshwater sources with effluent and those forever chemicals. It's becoming increasingly clear that we need to put the brakes on by finding ways of meeting the needs of a growing population, by protecting the integrity of Earth's natural systems. So, what does this all mean for your business? Well, for starters, business as usual is just no longer an option. For humanity to remain in a safe operating space, we must find more sustainable ways of operating. After all, there are so many risks associated with transgressing planetary boundaries, be it a shortage of raw materials, increased costs or disrupted supply chains. Only those businesses prepared to adopt sustainable practices and integrate these across their whole organisation and culture will have the resilience required to succeed in the longer term. The starting point is to assess the company's social and environmental impacts and how these relate to the planetary boundaries. We need to use science-based targets to drive transformation. That means not only making changes in your own business, but also looking at your company's influence across the entire supply chain, both upstream and downstream. It's not difficult to make the business case. Not only is this about survival, but cutting costs by driving efficiencies, improving productivity, capturing opportunities, and driving innovation. There's growing evidence supporting the claims that by doing the right thing will secure you a competitive advantage. So here are some good starting points for ensuring your business operates within those planetary boundaries. Businesses that make the net zero pledge will streamline their operations whilst meeting the needs of people, profit and planet, commonly known as the triple bottom line. Hitting net zero by the government target of 2050 involves ensuring the activities within your value chain result in no net impact on the climate from greenhouse gas emissions. This demands a two-pronged approach: emissions reduction and emissions removal. As part of that transformation, one of the ways businesses can help us remain in that safe operating space is by rejecting that linear model of take, make and waste, and by embracing circular thinking instead. This is about innovatively designing products so that they can be recycled, reused, remanufactured and repurposed to keep resources in the value chain. There are clear synergies between the circular economy and the principles of the Planetary Boundaries framework. Challenging convention and investing in more sustainable strategies just makes good business sense. So, to conclude, there's never been a better time to start your sustainability journey. It's not only a moral imperative. Those businesses that operate within clear ESG, that's environment, social and governance boundaries, will help manage risks, build resilience and future-proof their operations. This is just a brief overview of the planetary boundaries. There's also a great Netflix documentary called Breaking Boundaries, narrated by David Attenborough, which I highly recommend you watch. And you can also learn more by getting hold of the book by the same title, written by Owen Gaffney, Johan Rockström and others. Thank you for listening.